Hello, thank you for stopping by. My name is Becky and this is Bex Reads, and today I am here to share with you my June wrap-up. I didn't do any weekly wrap-ups, so we're gonna have to talk about all of the books that I read in June. Yay! I'm so excited for it. I have really grown used to and in favor of just giving you my rapid fire ratings and some like fun stats, but no, we're gonna have to talk about all the books. Thankfully, I didn't read a whole bunch in June. I only read 8 books, so there's not going to be a lot to talk about, but I am going to have to talk about them. Out of 8 books, my average star rating was 3.38, which isn't good. I didn't have a single 5-star read or above in June, sadly. However, I did have one 4.5 star, which was The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. This was an audio arc that I received from NetGalley. This is a cozy fantasy romance about Keela, who is sort of this antisocial librarian who, during a raid on the library that houses these ancient texts full of magic, she and her sentient spider plant Kaz have to escape the library and take as many books as they can in order to keep them from being destroyed and flee elsewhere. And as they're fleeing, she makes the executive decision to go back to her childhood hometown island to lay low and just live her life as peacefully as possible. And when she gets there, she's just expecting to sneakily return, just mind her own business, not get caught up in anything, and stay out of the way of like the people in the capital, because in this world only certain people are supposed to have access to magic, and her having access to all these magical texts is frowned upon. But as it goes, she moves in and she immediately gets the notice of her next door neighbor, who actually was a young boy who really took a liking to her when she lived there as a kid. So it's sort of like this childhood friends to complete strangers to lovers again. She doesn't recognize him though, she doesn't remember him, so it's brand new for her. And she attracts the notice of the local villagers and they take a liking to her, and she starts up this jam shop to sort of help the people better their situations through jams that have special ingredients in them and things like that. I really enjoyed this story. It's a sweet, no steam, cozy fantasy romance. I loved the sentient plants in here, and we have a spider plant, and then we also have a sentient cactus. We also have a bunch of folkloric creatures, from unicorns to like these cloud bear things that protect the forest. You have water horses, and it's just so freaking whimsical and sweet. I loved it. I loved our cinnamon roll hero. He is truly a good guy down to his core. He just wants to help people. I love that our female main character Keela is an awkward book nerd. She, like I said, does have some antisocial tendencies, so it's sort of entertaining to see her try and navigate like talking to people and befriending people, although there were times that she could be a little unintentionally rude to people, which was like the one little thing that kept it from being a 5-star for me. Is I wish I would have liked her character a little bit more. I also just loved the audio narration of this. I think the narrator did a really good job of giving different characters their own voices. So this does release in July, I believe July 9th, so I'm hoping to get my hands on maybe an Owl Crate special edition of this. We'll see how pretty it is, but I definitely want to get a copy of this. And if you like sweet cottagecore, cozy fantasy romances with very low stakes, I'm sure you'll like this. I then had 2 4-star reads, including The Mirrored Heavens by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the 3rd book in the Between Earth and Sky series, I believe is the title of it. I got this audio through Everand, which, once again, thank you to whoever has been using my Everand referral code. I say it every month. I did not have to pay for my Everand audiobooks again this month. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If you ever want to get, I believe it's now 1 month free of Everand, my referral code is down in the description. You get a free month, I get a free month. I'm ever so grateful. I did buddy read this with Laura at a book circus. We have buddy read all of the books in this series, so it was nice to round out this series, complete a series together. So I can't tell you too much about this book because it is the third and final book in a series. But what I can tell you is this is a pre-Columbian epic fantasy series in which we are following a young man named Serapio who is a god vessel. So he has a god in him. He is blinded. He can see through the eyes of crows. We also follow Shiala, who is a shape-shifting siren. She's a ship captain. And they sort of meet up and they have to journey to Tova for this eclipse that will take place that will give Serapio his powers. Meanwhile, there are other people and tribes in the mix that are trying to stop Serapio from doing this, and it just all culminates in this big epic fantasy. And in this one, we're really just seeing Serapio and Shiala sort of make their way back towards one another while all these other different people are trying to stop them from doing so. So I really just loved seeing Shiala and Serapio making their way back to one another and the things and trials they have to go through for that. I loved seeing Shiala really embrace her power and use that in a very vengeful but also justified way. It was really exciting to see. I love the multicast narration of these audiobooks. All three of them are multicast, so it gives each character their own voice, which I appreciate. I also just found the ending to this one to be rather satisfying. I felt like it tied up some ends that needed to be tied up. My biggest complaint with this is there were some POVs that I didn't really love reading. For example, Narampa's, I could have cared less about her POV. Anytime I was in her POV, I just wanted to be with somebody else. I also felt like the pacing of this book was really off for me. It was really slow in the beginning. And then the midway mark for quite a chunk of chapters, I was hooked. There was things happening and I was so invested in what was going on. And then it sort of fizzled out again toward the end, and then at the end it got to a point where I was invested again. So it wasn't a favorite by any means, but I did enjoy my overall time with it. My other 4-star read was The Veiled Kingdom by Holly Renee. This is a book that I purchased this year. I purchased it at a Polycon. This is what I would say a new adult fantasy romance. We are following Nira, who is this princess who is trying to escape her father's kingdom. Her father is a pretty emotionally and kind of physically abusive person. Her mother has died. There's a revolution in this kingdom and she just wants to get out. But she's having problems doing that, and she ends up finding herself in the cell of her father's castle. Nobody recognizes her because nobody has ever really seen her since she's become an adult because her father has kept her sequestered. So one day, Dacre and his revolutionary crew storm into the castle. They are there to try and save Dacre's sister, and they end up capturing her as well, and they take her back to their veiled kingdom, haha, title. And they have no idea that she is the princess, and she's trying to keep it that way because if they knew that she was the princess, they could use her to manipulate the king, kind of, or so they think. I personally don't think they would because it doesn't really seem like the king gives a shit about her. But nonetheless, she's trying to keep her identity a secret, but as she and Dacre get closer, as she's learning more about this revolution, it's getting harder and harder for her to keep her secret identity. So I really liked the mix of plot and smut within this book. I feel like it was really well balanced, especially compared to Holly Renee's other book series, the Stars and Shadows series that was much more smut heavy. I was very pleasantly surprised at how slow burn this book was for a Holly Renee book. One of the things that I didn't like about her other series was that the smut happened really quick and there was so much of it. Whereas this one, it takes well into 50% for them to even get frisky, and then it takes till the almost end for them to actually act on that. So very pleasantly surprised with that. I really liked the possessive male main character Dacre. I thought he had just the right amount of possessiveness and alpha maleness to go along with our female main character. This had one of my favorite tropes, which is the one bed trope, and this book is just stunningly beautiful. Look at this foiling. It has character art inside of it. All of the chapter pages are black. It's got more artistic detail, and this is just a stunning book. My complaints with this book is, one, there is a cliffhanger, and while I really liked how it ended because it was like, oh my god, the ending was great. However, it is a cliffhanger, and so now I have to wait around for the next book, which I don't love doing because I oftentimes forget what happens in books till the next one comes out. So there is that drawback. And this book is marketed as enemies to lovers, and I just don't think it is enemies to lovers. I think of it more as strangers who just don't like each other. There's nothing really enemies about them. They aren't actively trying to kill each other. He is very much trying to help her succeed and like becoming stronger, learning to fight, all this jazz. She's not actively trying to kill him. The only thing is he hates her father as king and ruler of this kingdom. That's it. That's not enemies to lovers. And so that kind of peeved me too. Like, can we stop labeling shit as enemies to lovers unless the people are actively trying to kill one another, please? But overall, this was a really fantastic fantasy romance. I do plan on continuing this series, and if you're into that kind of thing, I think you'd really enjoy this. I then had one 3.5-star read, and that was Out of Sight by Clea White, which I did a vlog for, this vlog right here, so I'm not going to go into what this book is about and my feelings on it. If you want to know my feelings on it, go watch that vlog, please. I would appreciate it. But this was a free ebook that I picked up on one of those Stuff Your Kindle days, so I didn't have to pay for this. I then had three 3-star reads, including The House in the Pines by Anna Reyes. This was a thriller. I know, right? Who am I? But I did get my prompt of reading a thriller, and I actually did it. This was a gift from my sister, so I didn't purchase this. This is about Maya, who witnessed an unexpected death of a friend when she was younger, and now that she's older, she is witnessing unexplained deaths again that all seem to happen around this one very mysterious man that she knew. So she's taking it upon herself to try and almost reconnect with this guy and sort of get into his defenses, ask for his help to try and see if she can figure out his connection to these unexplained deaths. Meanwhile, she's dealing with a lot of like mental turmoil and trauma. She can't remember a lot of the things that she thinks she's supposed to remember. She's also dealing with an addiction to like pills and things like that. And it leads to her figuring out some things that were done to her in her past by this man that she needs to remember in order to figure out his connection to these murders. Well, I'm not the biggest thriller reader, but this was a really fast-paced, quick, and interesting plot. I did like the audio narration of it, and even though the plot was interesting, I did figure out like the gist of the plot pretty early on. So it's a very forgettable read for me, and I just didn't connect to any of the characters on a real deep level. This felt like a pretty like fast-paced surface level thriller to me. There wasn't anything like, oh, super shocking about it. But hey, I read a thriller, got a book off my physical TBR. Yay me. I then read Masquerade by O.O. Sangoyomi. I probably butchered that name. So this was an ARC that I received. I got the audio ARC from NetGalley, and then I received a physical ARC from Bookish First as well. So it was sort of like a double tag team, what do they call it? Cross reading experience, I guess. I don't know what the hell that, immersive reading. That's what it was. It was an immersive reading experience. We're following this young woman named Adodo, who is a blacksmith in her local village, and all the blacksmith women are seen as witches because they have this ability to manipulate metal and give it certain qualities and just the way it looks and things like that. So people claim they're witches. And one day she is working and she gets kidnapped from her village, and she gets taken to this other village where she is forced into a marriage with this warrior king. And she thinks, okay, my life is about to be a hell of a lot better. The only problem is she doesn't want to get married to him until he can bring her mother to this village. So that's sort of the tension in their relationship, is like, I'm not going to marry you until you find my mother and bring her back. And meanwhile, he's trying to convince her, I definitely will. Can we just get married and whatnot? And along the way, they're also getting to know one another, and she's discovering the political machinations that are going on in this new village, and the secrets and the dangers that are befalling her as his new bride, and how her life isn't quite as great as it's gonna seem to be, apparently. So I liked Adodo's journey to taking control of her destiny and really embracing who she is as a person and the abilities that she has. I really liked the West African setting in here. I thought it was It was beautifully described to me. Like, I think it could have been described a little bit better, but what I got as far as description, my mind was able to conjure up, like, the places and the setting itself, and I thought it was very beautiful. This book did take a darker turn than what I was expecting it to, which I kind of enjoyed because it threw me for a loop and it added that little bit of drama to it, and I liked the audio narration of this. However, for some reason, when I went into this book, I was thinking that it was going to be a romance because it talked in the synopsis a lot about how her relationship with this warrior king plays out. This is not a romance. Not at all. They had no chemistry, in my opinion, and their relationship is extremely toxic. And there's no romantic element whatsoever, in my opinion, within this story. So that was sort of something that I expected that didn't live up to my expectations. And none of these characters are likable characters. Even though I could admire Adodo's journey to discovering who she is, she was not a likable character. The guy was not a likable character. The side characters were not likable characters. So if you are somebody who likes unlikable characters, here you go. You might really enjoy this. This was an okay read. It just wasn't anything memorable and wow. But look at this cover. This cover is stunning. My other 3-star read was Ocean of Sin and Starlight by Karina Halley. I buddy read this with April and Crystal. This was an ARC that I received from Karina Halley herself. Look at this. It's very beautiful. I really love this cover. I was very, excited about the fact that I actually received a physical ARC of this because I was expecting to love this because I absolutely loved A Ship of Bones and Teeth. So this is an interconnected standalone to A Ship of Bones and Teeth. You can read it without having read that book, but I wouldn't suggest you do because this follows characters who are linked to Marin and Ramsay from A Ship of Bones and Teeth. So in this, we are following Larimar, who is Marin's sister, and she is trying to find her sister. And we follow Aragon, who was a once witch turned vampire priest. He's trying to do his godly duty as a priest and help his parishioners and all that jazz, but meanwhile, he's also very disparaging of his faith. He doesn't really believe in God despite being a priest. And he needs to constantly kill people in order to sustain himself. But once he captures Larimar, he ends up sort of torturing her to keep her alive while continuously taking her blood, because Siren's blood is 1,000 times more potent to him than human blood. So if he can keep taking her blood but also keep her alive, that's his goal. And in the midst of him kidnapping her, torturing her, keeping her hostage, they fall in love, I guess. If you are somebody who likes a really fun and aggressive smut, boy oh boy will you love this. I did love the fun, aggressive smut, let me tell you. I loved the inventive use of a candle and chains and a rosary and a crucifix. It was interesting. It was fun. I love that these characters are very monstrous beings. They are monsters and they embrace their monstrous side and they revel in each other's monstrous sides. However, this is very insta-love and I couldn't really understand why Larimar would fall in love with Aragon, because where sometimes captor-captive, I can sort of understand why they would fall in love with their captor, because maybe they treat them not as bad as the situation they've been in before. They can have very sweet moments with them. They can provide for them. He was straight up torturing her. Are you that into pain that you're gonna fall in love with a guy who literally nails you to a cross and brings you to the brink of death? Couldn't be me, but sure. I did not like the male main character Aragon at all. I could not stand him. He was not one of those morally gray characters that I can find some sort of retribution for in my mind, that I can be like, oh, I love that about him. He wasn't a good person when he was a witch. He had thoughts of wanting to kill his wife and children just because his children were loud and his wife didn't want to sleep with him. What, sir? How am I supposed to empathize with you when you're a dick? And then when he becomes this pastor vampire, he was also just so goddamn unlikable. Like, you don't even believe in what you're doing, so I don't like you for that because you have no, like, moral standing for it. You torture this poor siren for no other reason. You couldn't find another way to get her blood without literally nailing her to a cross as though she was your own personal fucking Jesus. I didn't mind the fact that he literally crucified her to a cross, okay? I didn't. What I didn't like was the fact that she fell in love with him when he did this. And this was the only solution that he could find to keeping her alive and getting her blood. I'm like, what, sir? You have chains. Couldn't you, like, chain her to the cross? You didn't have to literally crucify her. There was also a rape scene in this book that I did not think was imperative to the plot of this story. It's not to our female main characters, so don't worry about that. It takes place well into the latter half of the book. And it happens to a character that I, one, had no emotional connection to. I didn't even know that well. It was just a character that sprung up out of nowhere for like 2 sentences and then she gets raped. It wasn't a very graphic rape scene, but just for it to be there, I was like, why is this here? Usually when I read rape scenes in books, they're never pleasant to read, my God, but usually there's some sort of emotional connection that I have to that character to make it even more disgusting, to make it more even visceral for me. I didn't know this character. No emotional anything was happening during this scene other than my wonder of, like, why am I reading this? Like, what does this do for the plot? I tried to rationalize it and be like, well, if this didn't happen, then this wouldn't happen, and we needed this to happen for this to happen. But I was just like, really? This just wasn't needed, in my opinion. There is also a time jump in this story about halfway through. There's a 5-year time jump that could have been like 2 days for all it mattered, because in that 5-year time jump I got diddly squat information of what the characters were doing, how they were developing, or anything like that. It just goes from this point to this point and then things continue on, and nothing, absolutely nothing. Within that 5 years I should have been able to empathize with where our characters were going, get a sense of how they felt about the events that led them to this 5-year time jump, really get a sense of longing and regret for what happened. Nope, not at all. So why that 5-year time jump was in there, I have no idea. Didn't make sense to me. For the first half of this book, it's pretty much just aggressive sex. And in the latter half of the book, it's anticlimactic revenge. And it needed more plot. So I was just incredibly saddened by this book because I wanted to love it. I was so excited to read it, and it fell flat. And my most disappointing book of June was my 1-2 star. And once again, this was a book that I had high expectations for, and that is A Leather and Lark by Bryn Weaver. I got this audiobook through Libby, so I didn't have to pay for it, but this is book 2 in the Ruinous Love series. It follows Butcher and Blackbird, which was the first book, which I really enjoyed that one. So in this, we follow Lark, who is the friend of Sloane from the first book, and Lachlan, who is the brother of Rowan from the first book. And Lachlan wants to get out of the contract killer / cleanup business. However, he can't do this for reasons. And when Lark's family sort of threatens Sloane and Rowan from book 1 and their relationship, Lark has this very strong bond with Sloane, so she doesn't want anything to disrupt Sloane's happiness that she has. So in order to do this, she convinces Lachlan to enter into a marriage of convenience with her, because if they are married, her family is now tied to his family through Rowan, and so Rowan and Sloane will be left alone. It's such a convoluted plot. But they enter into this arranged marriage, and through them being forced to live together, they end up developing feelings, and things go from there. This was a disappointment. The only 2 things that I really loved about it were the marriage of convenience. I do love that trope. And there were some fun killing scenes within this book. I mean, at one time she pours like epoxy or resin down a guy's throat. She's very into glitter, so every time she like kills somebody and keeps a memento, it always has something to do with glitter. So it was very fun in that aspect. However, this didn't have nearly the humor that Butcher and Blackbird did. It didn't have very many like morbidly fascinating scenes. What I got was fun, but I wanted more of it. I wanted more fun serial killer shit, okay? And as I mentioned, the plot of the story is very contrived. I really tried to like just go with it. It was just very boring to read for a lot of it because there wasn't a lot of excitement happening. They're just like bickering back and forth as they're in this arranged marriage. I skipped a lot of the smut scenes in this book because I didn't feel their chemistry. I didn't feel that like spark of attraction or romance that I needed. So when the smut happened, I guess it was fun smut, I guess. It just wasn't worded, narrated. Something about it just made me cringe. And there was a lot that made me cringe in here, okay? I did not love the audio narration of this. It wasn't for the narrators themselves. When they were just speaking to one another, they were fine. However, they do this stupid, like, tinkly laugh thing a lot throughout this book. They do, I don't know if it's like them narrating it or if it's just like a recorded thing that they do. I don't know. But it's the same thing that the narrators do in the ACOTAR graphic audios where they do that like high-pitched thing. I can't do it. I really can't. But with ACOTAR, it annoyed me as well, but I could sort of play it off because they're fae. They're supposed to sound a little other, you know? These are not fae. These are normal people. These are killers. And so their high-pitched tinkly laugh that they do a lot, oh my god. Apparently they find each other fucking hilarious because it was ridiculous. Every time she would chuckle, it wasn't a chuckle, it was a tinkly high-pitched laugh, and it just grated on my goddamn nerves. And then, okay, Lark is supposed to be a singer. The song she writes was awful. Awful. Oh my god. She sings a song at one point in this book, and I physically felt myself like, ugh. Like it gave me a physical reaction to hearing this narrator sing this god-awful song in this very high-pitched voice that just didn't sound right. Now, granted, I had this on like 2.5 times speed, so it definitely didn't help the fact that it was sped up. But even just the words of the song, I was like, ugh. It was so cringeworthy. So this was just a very disappointing book for me. I wouldn't be surprised if it made it to my worst books of the year because I just had like this visceral, physical reaction to the audio narration of this book, the elements of it. Oh, yeah. So I haven't heard the best of things. Many a people, when I posted to my Instagram stories if they were disappointed with this, so many people DM'd me and like, yeah, so was I. So I do plan on continuing to the third book in this series, and hopefully it's better. Hopefully it gets that humor and that morbid funness back. But this one just wasn't it. Alright, so those were all the books that I read and where I got them from. So let me do a quick unhaul for the month, and then I will share with you the books that I hauled this month. So I will be unhauling The House in the Pines. I think I'm actually going to keep this and let my sister read it because she tends to like thrillers more than me. I'm unhauling Masquerade because while this was okay, I just won't ever reread it. It'll probably be as an added book bonus for anybody who buys a book from my Pango because it is an ARC. I can't sell it. I will be unhauling Ocean of Sin and Starlight. This will be sent to Jackie because I will not ever reread this book. I went through my shelves and pulled off some books that I just knew I wasn't going to gravitate to. One of them being God Save the Queen. This is a book that I picked up on my road trip last year for my birthday at an indie bookstore, and I did try to read this. However, I got about like 50 pages into it and I just had no desire to continue reading it. I'm also unhauling The Accidental Queen, which is another book I picked up on my road trip. I DNF'd this because of the male main character. I did not like him at all. He's one of those characters that he's royalty, and so he fucks around until he meets the woman of his dreams. But there was a point in this book where he was getting it on with somebody who he had been like sleeping with regularly, and she obviously cared about him. He tells her to turn around because he doesn't want to look at her face while they're fucking. What? I'm sorry, asshole. What? I am also sadly unhauling Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli. I tried listening to this audiobook. I think I got, I don't know, like 50% into it or something like that. And I had to DNF it because I just didn't care about this story. And I really wanted to love this story because it is a witch hunter dynamic. But the female main character in here was just so annoying. The male main character was so oblivious. I didn't feel their chemistry. I didn't care about the whatever the plot was that was going on. And it saddened me, but I was just so bored and I didn't care, so I DNF'd it. This is an Owl Crate edition. It's got some under the cover art. It's got a reversible dust jacket, so if you want this, it'll be up on my Pango. I am also unhauling Thistlefoot. I will probably send this to my sister Tammy because I know she was wanting to read it. This wasn't what I was wanting. I thought this was going to be much more fantastical. And this is very much like a general fiction book about a brother and a sister who find themselves inheriting Thistlefoot, the house on chicken legs, and like traveling around the US as part of this performing show. That was not what I wanted to read. And lastly, I am also unhauling The Wolf King by Atlee Wykes because you will see I got a new edition of this. My sister sent it to me for an early birthday present. I did love this book, but I don't love it enough to have 2 copies of it. Now for my very small monthly haul. I hauled more books than I'm going to show you physically because I did like pre-order some. So the first book that I hauled this month was In the Hour of Crows by Dana Elmendorf. If you saw my mid-year book freakout tag, I will link it down below. This is my favorite book of the year so far. It's super short, but it is like a gothic, witchy murder mystery. Murder mystery? Say what, Becky? That doesn't sound like something you would enjoy, but boy did I ever. But I needed a physical copy because it is one of very few, I think only 2 6-star reads I've had so far this year. I also hauled this edition of The Wolf King, which matches the other books that I have, so thank you, sister, for sending this to me for an early birthday present. I appreciate it. This is actually the other book that got 6 stars for me this year, so loved it. I also got my fantasy romance fairy loot for June, right? I think, yeah. And that is Nectar of the Wicked by Ella Fields. It's got some really pretty stenciled edges. I have never read an Ella Fields book. That's about to change for an upcoming project, but it won't be this one. But I like this cover, like the naked hardback. I like the character art in here. It gives very much winter vibes. So maybe this is a book I will read in the winter. From reading the synopsis, it is like an arranged marriage. Girl who is a changeling needs to get to the Fae realms, so marries this man who is going to help her. Hopefully there's spice in it. I don't know. But I'm willing to give this one a try. I also will be receiving my Arcane Society soon of the Ever King and the Ever Queen, these ones. So I'm considering it hauled in here because I did pay for it this month, so you'll see it in the future, but I'm putting it on here. And then I also pre-ordered the Fairy Loot edition of When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. I wasn't in love with that book by any means, but that fucking book is so pretty. Those are the books that I hauled this month. And this is the total that I spent on books this month. Let me know down in the comments what was your favorite book of June. But if you don't want to comment that but would like to let me know that you made it to the end of this video, could you leave me a plant emoji for the sentient plants in a spell shop. And with that, thank you so much for watching, and until my next video, good luck on your July reading plans. Bye!